I was cutting vegetables for lunch when my son Oliver asked the question that shattered my world. He was sitting at the kitchen counter, swinging his legs, completely unaware of what he'd just said. "Mommy, why does Uncle Nolan sleep in your room when you travel?" The knife slipped from my hand and clattered against the cutting board. I turned slowly, forcing my face into something that hopefully looked normal. "What do you mean, sweetie?" Oliver shrugged, reaching for another cookie. "Last time you went to see Grandma, I had a bad dream and went to find Daddy. But Uncle Nolan was coming out of your bedroom. He said Daddy asked him to stay over to keep an eye on us." My blood turned to ice. I'd been in Seattle visiting my mother for a work conference. That was weeks ago. Nolan, my brother, my husband Keith's best friend since college, the man who'd been Keith's best man at our wedding, who came to every birthday party, every holiday dinner, who called me sis and brought Oliver expensive presents and played the perfect uncle role. My name is Victoria, and this is my revenge story. But before we continue, don't forget to subscribe, like, and leave a comment with the city you're watching from. It really helps me bring you more stories. I smiled at Oliver and told him Uncle Nolan probably just needed a place to crash. Then I sent him to play in his room. My hands were shaking as I pulled out my phone and opened the calendar. I traveled for work regularly, consulting gigs that took me away for a few days at a time. I'd always trusted Keith completely. We'd been married for nearly a decade. Nolan had been around even longer, first as the brother I'd introduced Keith to at a family barbecue, then as his college roommate. They'd been inseparable ever since. That night, I told Keith I needed to go to Boston for a client meeting the following week. He barely looked up from his laptop. "Sure, babe, I'll hold down the fort." Then he texted someone, and I caught the brief smile on his face before he noticed me watching. He cleared his throat and went back to typing. I went upstairs and locked myself in the bathroom. My reflection looked like a stranger, pale, shocked, hollow-eyed. I'd spent my entire life being the responsible one, the overlooked daughter, while Nolan got all the praise. Our mother still introduced him as my son, the venture capitalist, while I was just Victoria. She does consulting. I'd built my own success, my own family, my own happiness separate from his shadow. Or so I thought. I pulled out my phone and started making a list of every business trip I'd taken in the past year. If what Oliver said was true, if Nolan had been in my bedroom while I was gone, then I needed to know exactly how long this had been happening. I needed to know everything, and I was going to find out before I made a single move. I didn't actually go to Boston. Instead, I checked into a hotel 15 minutes from our house in suburban Portland and waited. I'd told Keith I was leaving early morning, kissed Oliver goodbye while he was still groggy, and driven off like normal. Then I circled back and parked along a side street with a clear view of our driveway. I bought a cheap pair of binoculars from a sporting goods store and sat in my car with coffee and a notebook. Keith left for work at his usual time, his graphic design portfolio bag slung over his shoulder. Oliver's nanny arrived to take him to school. The house sat empty for hours. I was starting to think I'd imagined the whole thing, that I was being paranoid, when Nolan's silver Tesla pulled into my driveway. My brother, Golden Boy Nolan, who'd gotten into Yale while I went to state school, who'd married perfect Amanda and had perfect twin girls, who worked in venture capital and posted LinkedIn humble brags about his latest investments. Our mother worshipped him. At every family dinner, it was Nolan this, Nolan that. Look what Nolan accomplished. I'd spent my whole life in his shadow, and I'd made peace with it because I thought at least I had my own family, my own life, something that was mine. He used his key to let himself in, the key I'd given him for emergencies. He stayed for hours. I watched the windows, seeing movement in the living room, then nothing. Around lunchtime, I saw him pass by the upstairs bedroom window, my bedroom window. When he finally left, his hair was wet, like he'd showered. He was wearing different clothes than when he'd arrived, casual instead of the business attire he'd had on. I drove back to the hotel and threw up in the toilet. Then I opened my laptop and logged into our cell phone account. Keith had no idea I had the master password. I'd set up the family plan when we first got married and never mentioned it. I pulled up the records and started searching. Texts between Keith and Nolan going back months. Hundreds of them at all hours. But they were careful. Nothing explicit, just "see you soon," and "can't wait," and inside jokes I didn't understand. The real pattern was in the call logs. Every single time I'd traveled for work in the past several months, Nolan had called Keith within an hour of my departure. The calls lasted for hours, sometimes until past midnight. Then I found something else that made my stomach drop. Large cash withdrawals from our joint account, always the day before my trips. Thousands of dollars here and there. When I added them up, Keith had pulled out close to $30,000 over the past year. Money I'd earned, because my consulting work paid triple what Keith made as a graphic designer. Money that was supposed to be going toward Oliver's college fund, toward the kitchen renovation we'd been planning. I pulled up our credit card statements next. Hotel charges in downtown Portland, expensive boutique hotels, on dates when I'd been traveling. Charges at restaurants Keith and I had talked about trying, but never got around to visiting. Charges at a jewelry store I didn't recognize. I clicked through to the store's website and felt sick. Men's watches, cufflinks, luxury accessories. Keith didn't wear watches, but Nolan did. I'd noticed his new Rolex at the last family dinner, and he'd laughed it off as a gift to himself for closing a big deal. My husband had bought my brother a Rolex with money I'd earned. The date on the statement was right after I'd returned from a conference in Denver. I'd come home exhausted, and Keith had been so attentive, so sweet, asking about my trip and rubbing my shoulders. The whole time, he'd been hiding a credit card statement that showed he'd spent the week I was gone playing house with my own brother. I needed proof they couldn't deny. I drove to a sketchy electronics store in a strip mall across town and paid cash for surveillance cameras with audio. The kid behind the counter didn't ask questions, just showed me how to set them up with an app on my phone that would let me watch live footage from anywhere. That night, I told Keith I had another trip coming up, a week-long conference in Seattle. His eyes lit up for just a second before he rearranged his face into supportive husband mode. "That's great, honey. Big client? Potentially huge," I lied. Could mean a major contract. The next morning, while Keith was in the shower, I installed cameras. One inside the bedroom smoke detector, positioned to capture the whole room. Another in the living room bookshelf, hidden behind a framed photo of our wedding day. The same wedding where Nolan had given a toast about how Keith was like a brother to him. The irony wasn't lost on me. The app showed me crystal clear footage of our empty rooms. I went through the motions for the next few days, packing my suitcase, confirming my fake hotel reservation out loud during a phone call Keith could overhear. I even complained about the early morning flight, really selling it. Then I left for Seattle and checked into the same local hotel as before. I didn't have to wait long. That very evening, around 7, Nolan showed up. I watched through the camera as my brother walked into my house like he owned it, carrying an overnight bag and a bottle of wine. Keith greeted him at the door, and they didn't even wait to get to the bedroom. Right there in the living room, where Oliver and I watched movies every weekend, where we'd celebrated birthdays and holidays, my husband kissed my brother. I watched for 10 minutes before I had to close the app. My whole body felt numb. This wasn't some recent mistake or moment of weakness. The way they moved together, the easy intimacy, the way Keith's hand went to the small of Nolan's back. This had been going on for a long time, but I forced myself to keep watching throughout the evening, documenting everything. I needed to understand the full scope of the betrayal. That night, I learned that Nolan wasn't gay. He talked about Amanda, about their girls' dance recital coming up, about some trip they had planned to Napa. He was living a complete double life, and Keith was helping him do it. Around midnight, I heard Nolan say something that made everything click into place. "I can't believe we've been doing this since college, and no one's figured it out. Amanda's clueless. Victoria's too busy with work to notice, and your kid just thinks I'm the fun uncle." Keith laughed. "Victoria thinks she's so smart with her big consulting job. She has no idea she's funding our entire relationship." They clinked wine glasses. My wine glasses from my kitchen, filled with wine they'd bought with my money, celebrating how stupid I was. I sat in that hotel room and made myself watch the rest. I documented every word, every movement. I was going to need all of it. The next morning, I drove to an urgent care clinic across town where nobody knew me. I told the doctor I needed a full STD panel. She asked if there was any specific exposure I was worried about, and I just said I wanted to be thorough. The nurse drew blood and took samples, and they told me results would be ready in a few days. Then I went back to the hotel and started digging into Nolan's life. I'd always been good at research. It's what made me successful in consulting. And now I turned those skills on my own brother. I started with social media, but Nolan's accounts were carefully curated. Perfect family photos, business updates, nothing real. So I went deeper. I accessed property records and found that Nolan and Amanda owned their house, but Nolan also had a condo listed under an LLC. I pulled up the LLC formation documents, public record, and found it had been established over a decade ago, right around the time he and Keith met. The address was in the Pearl District, one of the most expensive neighborhoods in Portland. I drove there and parked outside a sleek modern building. The directory showed the LLC name next to a unit on the top floor. This wasn't just an affair. This was a whole secret life, a place where Keith and Nolan could play house without anyone knowing. I thought about all the times Nolan had called me to ask about Keith, pretending to be the caring brother-in-law checking in on his friend. He'd been checking on his boyfriend. A few days later, my phone buzzed. It was the clinic. I answered with shaking hands. "Mrs. Patterson, we have your results." Most everything came back negative, but we did detect chlamydia. We'll need you to come in for treatment, and we'll need to contact your partner for testing as well. I thanked her and hung up. Keith had given me an STD, which meant Nolan had given it to Keith, which meant my brother had been sleeping with God knows who else besides my husband and his own wife. I sat in my car outside Nolan's secret condo and felt something shift inside me. The shock was wearing off. The hurt was crystallizing into something harder, sharper. I wasn't going to cry. I wasn't going to fall apart. I was going to destroy both of them. But first, I needed to know everything. I called a private investigator whose name I'd found online, someone with good reviews and a discreet approach. We met at a coffee shop and I laid out what I knew. He didn't even blink, just took notes and quoted me a price. I paid his retainer in cash from the emergency fund. Keith didn't know I kept in a separate account, money I'd been saving from my consulting bonuses. "I need to know everything," I told him. "Financial records, communications, where they go, who they see, how long this has been going on. And I need it fast." He nodded. "Give me a week." I didn't have to wait that long. The next day he called with the first bombshell. "Your brother's been withdrawing money from your joint accounts too. He's got signing authority. Did you know that?" I didn't. Keith must have forged my authorization to add him. "How much?" "Over the past several months? Close to $50,000. The money's going into the LLC account for the condo. Your husband's name is also on that account. They've been furnishing it, paying utilities, treating it like their own private getaway. $50,000. My money, funding their love nest." I thanked him and hung up. That evening, I got a text from Keith. "Hope Seattle's going well. Oliver misses you. Love you." Attached was a photo of Oliver holding up a drawing he'd made. I stared at that picture of my son, the one innocent person in this whole mess, and I knew I had to be smart about this. I couldn't just blow everything up. I had to protect Oliver, secure my assets, and make sure both Keith and Nolan paid for what they'd done. I texted back a heart emoji and started making a plan. I called my lawyer from the hotel room. Janet Wu was sharp, ruthless, and had handled my business contracts for the past several years. I'd watched her eviscerate opposing counsel in negotiations. Now I needed her to do that for me. "I need to talk to you about a divorce," I said. "And I need everything we discuss to be completely confidential." We met at her office that afternoon. I showed her everything: the camera footage, the financial records, the STD test results, the property documents for Nolan's secret condo. She watched the videos without expression, then sat back in her chair. "This is extensive evidence of infidelity and financial misconduct. The STD exposure is particularly damaging for him. In Oregon, we have no-fault divorce, but this level of evidence will absolutely impact asset division and custody. What do you want?" "Everything," I said. "The house, full custody of Oliver, and I want Keith to pay back every cent he stole from our accounts. Plus, I want this to hurt." Janet nodded. "We can do that, but we need to be strategic. First, secure your assets. Move money he can't access. Document everything he does have access to. Second, we gather more evidence. The more we have, the worse his negotiating position. Third, we file when you're ready to go nuclear. I left her office with a checklist. That evening, I opened a new bank account at a different institution and transferred half of our joint savings, my legal right since it was marital property. I redirected my consulting payments to the new account. I documented every asset we owned, every account, every investment. Then I went back to watching the camera feeds. Keith and Nolan had settled into a routine at my house. They cooked dinner together in my kitchen. They watched TV on my couch. They slept in my bed. It was like watching someone else's life, except it was mine they'd stolen. On the fourth night of my fake trip, I watched Nolan answer a phone call. "Hey, babe," he said, and I realized he was talking to Amanda, his wife. "Yeah, just having a guy's night with Keith. Victoria's out of town, so we're watching the game." He laughed at something she said. "Love you too. Kiss the girls for me." He hung up and turned to Keith. "Amanda wants us to host Thanksgiving this year. Family thing." Keith groaned. "Do I have to sit there and pretend I care about your mom's opinions on my career again? You know how she is. Victoria's the disappointment. I'm the golden child. Just smile and nod." Nolan grabbed 2 beers from my fridge. "Speaking of which, when are you going to tell Victoria you quit the design firm?" My blood ran cold. "Keith quit his job." "I don't know. Maybe never." Keith laughed. "She thinks I'm still going to the office every day. I've been using the time to work on my photography portfolio. If she knew I quit to pursue art full-time, she'd lose it." "Well, you're living off her money anyway. What's the difference?" They both laughed. I sat in that hotel room, shaking with rage. Keith had quit his job weeks ago and hadn't told me. He'd been pretending to go to work while I supported us, while I paid for everything, while he and my brother played house and mocked me. The investigator called the next morning with more findings. "Your brother's LLC? It's been making payments to several other people. Looks like your husband had other relationships before settling into this thing with your brother. I've got names, photos, transaction records. Send me everything," I said. When the files came through, I spent hours going through them. Keith had been cheating on me for years, not just with Nolan. There were at least 3 other men I could identify from the financial trail. People he'd met on apps. People he'd taken to that condo. Nolan had apparently known about all of it, had facilitated it, had helped cover it up. They'd turned my marriage into a joke, and my brother had orchestrated the whole thing. I looked at the calendar. I'd been gone for almost a week. It was time to come home. But I wasn't coming home as the same trusting wife who'd left. I was coming home as someone with a plan. I returned home from my fake Seattle trip with gifts for Oliver and a smile on my face. Keith hugged me at the door, asking about the conference, and I played along perfectly. I told him about fictional client meetings and keynote speeches while screaming inside. That night, after Oliver was asleep, Keith tried to initiate sex. I told him I was exhausted and had a headache. What I didn't tell him was that I'd started treatment for the chlamydia he'd given me, and there was no way in hell he was touching me ever again. The next morning, I scheduled a meeting with a forensic accountant Janet had recommended. I needed to trace every dollar Keith and Nolan had taken. The accountant, a woman named Patricia Chen, who came highly recommended, took one look at my bank statements and whistled. "This is pretty blatant. Your husband had withdrawal authorization on your accounts, and he's been pulling money consistently. The amounts are structured just under reporting thresholds. Someone taught him how to avoid flags. And this LLC your brother runs? It's receiving money from multiple sources, including what looks like your joint accounts. How much total are we talking?" Patricia tapped her calculator. "Conservatively, they've moved about 80,000 of your money through various channels over the past year alone. If we go back further, it could be significantly more. $80,000. I felt sick. Can we prove it was unauthorized?" "You authorized your husband to access the accounts, so that's tricky. But the fact that he didn't disclose the transfers to you, combined with the fact that the money went to fund his affair and his partner's LLC, that's financial misconduct in a divorce proceeding. Any judge will factor that into asset division." I asked her to prepare a full forensic report. I wanted documentation of every penny they'd stolen, every transaction, every lie. While I waited for the report, the private investigator called with another discovery. "Your brother's wife, Amanda, she's been making some interesting phone calls lately. Looks like she might be suspicious about something. She hired a private investigator of her own about a week ago." This was unexpected. Do you know what she's investigating? My contact says she thinks Nolan's having an affair. She doesn't know with who yet, but she's tracking his movements. Thought you'd want to know in case your paths cross. I thought about Amanda. Beautiful. Perfect Amanda with her perfect life and perfect children. She'd always been nice to me at family gatherings, but we'd never been close. She was part of Nolan's world, the world where everything was curated and pristine. I wondered what she'd do when she found out the truth. Then it hit me. Amanda could be useful. If she was already investigating Nolan, if she already suspected something, then she was halfway to the truth. And if she found out about Keith and Nolan, it would destroy Nolan's perfect image, his perfect marriage, everything he'd built. I asked the investigator to keep me updated on Amanda's investigation. Then I made a decision that would change everything. I was going to contact Amanda myself. I found Amanda at the farmer's market on Saturday morning. She was there with the twins, looking at organic produce and sipping a latte. I'd texted her earlier asking if she wanted to grab coffee and catch up. Sister-in-law bonding, completely innocent. We sat at a cafe while the twins played at a nearby playground in view. Amanda seemed distracted, not her usual polished self. There were dark circles under her eyes that makeup couldn't quite hide. "Are you okay?" I asked, keeping my voice gentle. She laughed, but it was hollow. "Honestly, I don't know. Nolan's been so distant lately. He's gone all the time, working late, taking trips. I know I should trust him, but something feels off." I took a sip of my coffee, measuring my next words carefully. "Have you asked him about it?" "Every time I bring it up, he gets defensive, says I'm being paranoid, that I'm not being supportive of his career." She looked at me with tired eyes. "Do you ever feel like you don't really know your husband?" The irony of the question almost made me laugh. "More than you know." I could have told her everything right then. I could have pulled out my phone and shown her the videos, the bank statements, the evidence of her husband's secret life, but that would have been too easy, too quick. I needed Amanda to discover the truth in a way that would maximize the damage to Nolan. I needed her to be my ally, not just a casualty. "If you're worried," I said slowly, "maybe you should look into it. You deserve to know the truth, whatever it is." Amanda nodded, wiping her eyes. "I actually hired someone, a private investigator. I felt awful doing it, like I was betraying our marriage, but I need to know. That's not betrayal," I told her. "That's protecting yourself." We talked for another hour, and I planted seeds carefully. I mentioned how Keith had been acting strange too, how I'd noticed some financial irregularities. I didn't say anything concrete, just enough to make her think, to make connections she'd follow up on herself. When we parted ways, Amanda hugged me. "Thank you for listening. It helps to know I'm not crazy." "You're not crazy," I assured her. "Trust your instincts." I watched her walk away with her daughters, and I felt something like pity. She was about to have her life blown apart just like mine. But unlike me, she didn't know it was coming yet. She didn't have time to prepare, to build her case, to position herself for war. That evening, Keith mentioned that Nolan had invited us to dinner at his house the following weekend. "Amanda's making that salmon thing you like," he said, scrolling through his phone. "Sounds great," I replied, already planning. A family dinner, all of us together, playing our roles. It would be the perfect setting for the next phase of my plan. The forensic accountant sent her report that night. It was worse than I'd thought. Keith and Nolan had been systematically draining my accounts for years, not just months. The total was over $150,000. They'd used the money for the condo, for trips, for gifts, for their entire secret life together. I forwarded the report to Janet. She called me within an hour. "Victoria, this is massive financial fraud. With this evidence, we can go after both of them. Criminal charges are possible if you want to pursue that route." I thought about it. Criminal charges would be public, messy, but maybe that was exactly what needed to happen. Maybe Nolan needed to lose everything. His reputation, his marriage, his perfect life, just like he'd helped Keith destroy mine. "Let me think about it," I told her. "I want the timing to be right." Because I was learning that revenge wasn't just about evidence and legal action. It was about strategy, about striking when they least expected it, about making sure the fall was as devastating as possible. And I was just getting started. The family dinner at Nolan's house was a masterclass in pretending. Amanda had gone all out. Fresh flowers on the table, expensive wine, the perfect meal. The twins were on their best behavior. Nolan played the doting father and loving husband. Keith complimented everything, playing the role of grateful guest and loyal friend. I sat there with a smile plastered on my face, watching them all perform. Our mother was there too, of course, holding court at the head of the table and talking about Nolan's latest business triumph. She barely asked me about my work. It had always been this way. "Nolan, honey, tell everyone about the tech startup you invested in," my mother said, beaming at her golden child. While Nolan launched into his story, I noticed Amanda watching him carefully. Her private investigator must have given her something, because her eyes were sharp, suspicious. She caught me looking and gave me a tight smile. After dinner, I helped Amanda clear the plates while the men took Oliver and the twins to the backyard. In the kitchen, Amanda poured us both wine. "My investigator found something," she said quietly, checking to make sure we were alone. "Nolan has a property I didn't know about, a condo in the Pearl District, registered under some business entity." I kept my face neutral. That's strange. Why would he need a separate property? That's what I want to know. Amanda's hands were shaking slightly as she loaded the dishwasher. "I'm having him followed. I need to know what he's doing there, who he's meeting." "When did you find out about this?" "A few days ago. I haven't confronted him yet. My lawyer said to gather more evidence first." So Amanda had already lawyered up. She was smarter than I'd given her credit for. "That's probably wise," I said. Through the kitchen window, I could see Nolan and Keith standing close together by the fence, talking in low voices while pretending to watch the kids. They looked so comfortable together, so natural. It made me sick. "Can I ask you something?" Amanda set down the dish she was holding and looked at me directly. "Keith and Nolan are really close, right? Like, they talk all the time?" "They're best friends," I said carefully. "Have been since college." "Has Keith ever mentioned anything about Nolan's behavior? Anything unusual?" This was it. The moment where I could tell her everything, show her the proof, end this charade. But I held back. Amanda's investigator would find the truth soon enough. When she discovered it on her own, with her own evidence, it would be more powerful. She'd be angrier, more motivated to burn Nolan's life to the ground. "No," I lied. "But if you're worried, you should keep digging." Amanda nodded slowly. "I'm going to. Something's not right, and I'm going to find out what it is." We rejoined the others for dessert. I watched my mother fawn over Nolan, watched Keith and my brother exchange secret glances, watched Amanda's forced smile as she served cake. This whole table was built on lies, and I was the only one who could see the full picture. When we finally left that night, Oliver fell asleep in the car almost immediately. Keith drove, humming along to the radio, completely oblivious to the fact that his world was about to implode. "Nice evening," he said. "Your mom was in a good mood." "She always is when Nolan's around," I replied, watching the streetlights blur past. "He's lucky to have such a solid family," Keith said. "Amanda, the girls, your mom's support. He's got it all figured out." I almost laughed. Nolan had nothing figured out. He'd built his life on lies and stolen money, and it was all about to come crashing down. The next morning, my private investigator called with news. "Amanda's investigator is good. He followed Nolan to the condo last night, after you all left the dinner. Got photos of Keith meeting him there." "Keith went there? Last night?" I'd thought he came straight home after dropping me and Oliver off, but he'd said he needed to stop for gas. Another lie. "Yep. They were there for a few hours." Amanda's investigator got it all on camera, them entering together, lights going on in the unit, the works. He's probably sending his report to Amanda right now. Everything was falling into place. Amanda would confront Nolan. Their marriage would explode. And when it did, I'd be ready to detonate my own bomb. I just needed to wait a little longer. Amanda called me the very next day, hysterical. "Victoria, I need to talk to you. Can you meet me somewhere? Please. It's about Nolan." We met at a park, away from everyone. Amanda's eyes were red and swollen. She handed me her phone. and I looked at the photos her investigator had taken. Nolan and Keith entering the condo building together. Nolan and Keith visible through the window, embracing. Timestamps showing they'd been there for hours. "I don't understand," Amanda said, her voice breaking. "Keith is your husband. Why would he and Nolan—" She couldn't even finish the sentence. I sat down on the bench beside her. This was the moment I'd been waiting for. The moment where Amanda became my ally instead of just another victim. "How long have you suspected?" "Months. Maybe longer." I kept telling myself I was imagining things. But the signs were all there. The distance. The secretiveness. The money disappearing from our accounts. She looked at me with devastated eyes. "Did you know?" "I found out recently," I said. "I've been gathering evidence." "Evidence? You mean this has been going on?" She stopped, processing. "How long?" I pulled out my phone and showed her some of what I had. Not everything, but enough. The financial records showing the transfers, the property documents, the camera footage from my house with timestamps going back weeks. Amanda watched it all, her face going from shock to rage. That son of a bitch. He's been stealing from me too. I thought we were building a life together, saving for the girl's future. And he's been... She stood up, pacing. "I'm going to destroy him. I'm taking everything. The house, the business, custody of the girls. He's not getting away with this. Neither is Keith," I said quietly. "I've already started divorce proceedings. I have a forensic accountant tracking every dollar they've stolen. I have video evidence, medical records showing Keith gave me an STD, documentation of financial fraud." Amanda stared at me. "Medical records? He gave you—" Her face went white. "Oh God, I need to get tested." "You should," I said gently. "I'm sorry. I know this is a lot." We sat there in silence for a moment. Two women who'd been betrayed by the men they'd trusted most. Then, Amanda's expression hardened. "We should work together. Pool our resources. Our evidence. Make sure they both pay for what they've done." This was exactly what I'd hoped for. I was thinking the same thing. We spent the next hour comparing notes, sharing evidence, planning strategy. Amanda's investigator had information I didn't have. Nolan's business dealings, his financial hiding places, his patterns. Combined with what I'd gathered on Keith, we had enough to destroy both of them completely. "There's something else," Amanda said. "My investigator found out that Nolan's been lying about his business success. That last big tech deal he's always bragging about. It fell through months ago. He's been using our savings to maintain appearances. We're basically broke, and I had no idea. So Nolan's perfect life was a facade in more ways than one. He wasn't just hiding an affair. He was hiding financial ruin. Does my mother know? I doubt it. You know Nolan. He'd die before admitting failure to your mom. I thought about all those family dinners. All those times my mother had praised Nolan's success while dismissing my achievements. He'd been lying to everyone, building an empire of deception, and I'd been so focused on feeling inferior that I'd never questioned it. "We need to tell her," I said. "My mother needs to know what her golden child has really been doing." Amanda looked uncertain. "Are you sure? That will destroy her. She should be destroyed," I said, surprised by the venom in my own voice. "She spent my entire life choosing Nolan over me, believing every word he said, treating me like I was less than. She deserves to know the truth about who she's been worshipping." Amanda nodded slowly. "Okay, but let's time it right. Maximum impact." We agreed to coordinate our divorces, to file simultaneously so neither Nolan nor Keith could warn the other or hide assets. We agreed to pool our evidence and share our legal teams. And we agreed that when we were ready, we'd expose everything. Not just to our families, but publicly. Because men like Nolan and Keith didn't just deserve to lose their marriages. They deserved to lose their reputations, their standing, everything they'd built on lies. As I drove home that afternoon, I felt lighter than I had in weeks. I wasn't alone anymore. Amanda and I were in this together, and together we were going to make sure our husbands, and my brother, lost everything. Amanda and I filed for divorce on the same day. We coordinated with our lawyers to have the papers served simultaneously, Keith at our house, Nolan at his office. We wanted them to realize at the exact same moment that their carefully constructed lie had been exposed. I was at a coffee shop when Keith called me, frantic. "Victoria, what the hell is this? Divorce papers? Where are you? We need to talk about this." "There's nothing to talk about," I said calmly. "I know everything, Keith. About Nolan, about the money, about all of it." Silence on the other end. Then, "I can explain." "No, you can't. My lawyer will be in touch about asset division and custody arrangements. Don't contact me directly again." I hung up. Within an hour, Nolan was calling me. I let it go to voicemail. He called again. And again. Finally, I answered. "Victoria, please, you have to understand." "Understand what, Nolan? That you've been sleeping with my husband for years? That you've been stealing my money to fund your affair? That you've been lying to everyone, including your own wife?" "Amanda filed too," he said, and I could hear the panic in his voice. "Did you two plan this together?" "Yes. We compared notes. Turns out we both married liars, but at least Amanda only had to deal with one. I got betrayed by my husband and my brother. Vic, please, I never meant to hurt you. Don't call me that. Don't call me ever again. And you should know, everything's coming out. The affairs, the money, the fake business success, all of it. I'm done protecting you." I hung up and blocked his number. Then I blocked Keith's number too. They could communicate through lawyers from now on. That evening I picked up Oliver from school and took him to his favorite pizza place. He chattered about his day, innocent and happy, unaware that his whole world was about to change. I'd already talked to a child therapist about how to handle this with him, how to protect him from the worst of it. "Mommy, is Daddy going to live with us still?" Oliver asked suddenly, his pizza halfway to his mouth. My heart clenched. "Why do you ask that, sweetheart? He seemed really sad today when I left for school, and he kept looking at his phone and making weird faces." I took a breath. "Daddy and I are going through some grown-up stuff right now. But no matter what happens, we both love you very much, and that will never change." Oliver nodded, accepting this in the way children do. "Okay, can I have ice cream?" While Oliver ate his ice cream, I got a text from Amanda. Nolan showed up at the house, crying, begging, the whole performance. I didn't let him in. The girls heard him yelling through the door. "They're asking questions." I texted back, "Stay strong. Stick to the plan." The plan was simple but devastating. In addition to the divorces, we were filing civil suits against both Keith and Nolan for financial fraud. We were releasing a joint statement to our social circles, carefully worded to avoid defamation, but clear enough that everyone would understand what had happened. And we were planning a visit to my mother's house to tell her the truth in person. That last part was what I was looking forward to most. The next day, Amanda and I drove to my mother's house together. We'd coordinated this carefully, bringing all the evidence with us: printed bank statements, photos, legal documents. My mother answered the door with a smile that faltered when she saw both of us together. "Victoria? Amanda? What's going on?" "We need to talk to you about Nolan," I said. "Can we come in?" My mother's living room was exactly as I remembered from childhood. Photos of Nolan everywhere, his Yale diploma framed on the wall, his achievements documented and displayed. There was one photo of me, from high school graduation, tucked in the corner. We sat down, and Amanda started. "Nolan and I are getting divorced." My mother gasped. "What? Why?" "Amanda, whatever's wrong, you two can work through it." "He's been having an affair," Amanda said flatly. "For years, with Keith." The color drained from my mother's face. "Keith? But that's Victoria's husband." "Exactly," I said. "And I'm divorcing him too. Your golden boy has been sleeping with my husband, stealing money from both of us, and lying about his business success. He's broke, Mom. The tech deal he's been bragging about? It failed. He's been using Amanda's savings to keep up appearances." My mother looked between us, shaking her head. No, that can't be right. Nolan wouldn't. He's successful, he's a liar," I said, and pulled out the stack of documents. "Here's the proof. Bank statements showing the transfers. Photos from the private investigator. Financial records showing he's been funneling money to a secret condo where he and Keith have been meeting. Medical records showing Keith gave me an STD, which means Nolan's been exposing Amanda to God knows what. I watched my mother's face as she looked through the evidence, watched her perfect image of her perfect son crumble, watched her realize that everything she'd believed about Nolan was a lie. "I don't understand," she whispered. "Why would he do this?" "Because he could," Amanda said bitterly. "Because everyone always believed him, always trusted him, always put him on a pedestal. He thought he was untouchable." My mother looked at me, and for the first time in my life, I saw something like guilt in her eyes. "Victoria, you chose him over me my entire life," I said quietly. "Every accomplishment I had, you dismissed. Every achievement you compared to his and found mine lacking. I built a successful career, raised a good kid, made my own life, and it was never enough for you. Well, now you know the truth. Your favorite child is a fraud and a cheat, and I'm the one who exposed him." My mother started crying. I felt nothing. No satisfaction, no vindication, nothing. I'd spent so long wanting her approval, wanting her to see me, and now that she finally did, I realized I didn't care anymore. Amanda and I stood up to leave. At the door, my mother called out, "What's going to happen to Nolan?" "He's going to lose everything," I said, "just like he deserves." The legal proceedings moved faster than I expected. Keith tried to fight the asset division, but the evidence was overwhelming. The cameras, the financial records, the medical documentation. He didn't have a leg to stand on. His lawyer advised him to settle. The settlement was brutal. I got the house, full custody of Oliver with Keith, limited to supervised visitation, and Keith was ordered to pay back every cent he'd stolen plus damages. The total came to over $200,000. Since he'd quit his job and had no income, the court set up a payment plan that would follow him for years. Nolan's divorce was even worse. Amanda got their house, primary custody of the twins, and a massive settlement that included half of his business holdings, which turned out to be worth far less than anyone thought. The forensic accountants discovered that Nolan had been cooking his books, inflating his success to investors. The SEC got involved. Criminal fraud charges were filed. The news spread through our social circles like wildfire. The joint statement Amanda and I released was picked up by a local business blog because of Nolan's prominence in the investment community. "Venture capitalist faces fraud charges amid affair scandal," ran the headline. Our names were kept private, but everyone who knew us could connect the dots. Nolan's clients started pulling their investments. His firm asked him to step down. His perfect reputation, built over decades, was destroyed in a matter of weeks. Keith moved into a studio apartment across town. He tried to see Oliver, but even the supervised visits were awkward. Oliver would come home quiet and confused, asking questions I didn't know how to answer. The therapist helped, but it was slow progress. One afternoon, about a month after the divorces were finalized, I ran into Keith at Oliver's school. He looked terrible. Unwashed hair, wrinkled clothes, dark circles under his eyes. "Victoria, please, can we talk? Just for a minute?" I looked at him. This man I'd loved for years. This man I'd built a life with, and felt nothing but contempt. "What could you possibly have to say to me?" "I'm sorry. I know that's not enough, but I am. I never meant for things to go this far. You stole from me for years, Keith. You gave me an STD. You let my own brother betray me. How far exactly did you mean for things to go?" He looked down at his feet. I was confused about who I was, what I wanted. "Nolan and we started in college before I even met you. I thought I could have both." "Both?" I laughed bitterly. "You didn't have me. You had my money, my home, my trust. But you never had me, because you never let me know who you really were. I do love you." "No, you don't. You loved what I could give you, the stable life, the cover story, the income. I was convenient." I picked up my bag. "We're done here. My lawyer will contact you about the payment schedule for what you owe me. Don't be late on the payments." I walked away and didn't look back. Amanda and I stayed in touch, supporting each other through the aftermath. She told me that Nolan had tried to reconcile, showed up at her new apartment begging for another chance. She'd called the police and gotten a restraining order. "He actually tried to blame you," Amanda told me over coffee. "Said you were always jealous of him, that you manipulated me into filing for divorce. Of course he did. Nolan's never taken responsibility for anything in his life. Well, he's taking responsibility now. The fraud trial starts next month. His lawyer says he's looking at serious prison time. I thought about that. Nolan in prison, his perfect image completely shattered. It should have felt like victory, but mostly I just felt tired. The real victory was smaller, quieter. It was in the way Oliver laughed freely now that the tension in our house was gone. It was in the new consulting contract I'd landed, the biggest of my career. It was in the fact that I'd taken my financial power back, secured my future, protected my son. It was in the fact that I'd survived. My mother called me eventually. She apologized, cried, begged me to let her see Oliver. I let her, but on my terms. And I made it clear that things between us would never be the same. She'd made her choice when she spent my whole life favoring Nolan. Now she had to live with the consequences. The final piece fell into place when Nolan's criminal trial concluded. He was found guilty on multiple counts of fraud and sentenced to federal prison. As he was led out of the courtroom in handcuffs, our mother sobbing in the gallery, I felt the last piece of anger dissolve. He'd lost everything. His marriage, his children, his career, his freedom, his reputation. Everything he'd valued, everything he'd built on lies, was gone. And I was still standing. The first morning I woke up in my house. Truly my house now. No Keith, no lies, no looking over my shoulder. I made coffee and sat on the back porch watching the sunrise. Oliver was still asleep upstairs. Everything was quiet and peaceful. My phone buzzed with an email from my lawyer. The first payment from Keith had cleared. It was a small amount, barely a dent in what he owed me, but it was something. A reminder that there were consequences, that actions mattered. Amanda texted me a photo of her and the twins at the beach. They looked happy, genuinely happy. She'd started dating someone new, a woman from her book club. Taking things slow, she'd told me, but it feels right. It feels honest. I was happy for her. She deserved honesty after everything. My consulting business was thriving. Without the drain of Keith's secret spending, without the stress of the lies, I'd been able to focus completely on my work. I'd landed 3 major contracts and hired 2 junior consultants to help manage the load. I was building something real, something that was entirely mine. Oliver adjusted better than I'd expected. The therapy helped, and so did the stability. Keith saw him twice a month under supervision, and that seemed to be enough for Oliver. He'd stopped asking when Daddy was coming home. He understood, in the way kids do, that sometimes families change shape. The previous week we'd gone to a family dinner at my mother's house. Just me, Oliver, and her. No Nolan. He was in prison, serving his sentence. My mother had visited him once and come back devastated. She was finally seeing him clearly, understanding what he'd done, what he'd always been. "I'm sorry," she told me over dinner. "For all those years I made you feel less than. You were always the strong one, the capable one. I just couldn't see it." I'd accepted her apology, though the wounds were still healing. But we were trying, building something new from the wreckage of what had been. I'd sold the expensive jewelry Keith had bought with my money. Turned out to be worth quite a bit. Used the money to set up a college fund for Oliver that only I could access. Everything I built now had safeguards, protections. I'd learned my lesson. Sometimes I thought about how different things could have been if I'd never found out. If Oliver hadn't asked that innocent question over lunch, I could have lived my whole life not knowing, funding their affair, being the fool. The thought made me sick, but I had found out. And instead of falling apart, I'd fought back. I'd gathered my evidence, made my allies, executed my plan. I'd protected my son and secured our future. I'd exposed the lies and made sure everyone involved paid the price. The doorbell rang, interrupting my thoughts. I opened it to find a delivery, flowers from a new client, thanking me for a successful project launch. I put them in a vase on the kitchen counter, next to the photo of Oliver and me from our recent trip to the coast. Just the 2 of us, smiling in the sunshine. This was my life now. Clean, honest, mine. No more secrets. No more betrayals. No more living in someone else's shadow. I'd taken the worst thing that had ever happened to me and turned it into freedom. I heard Oliver's footsteps on the stairs. Mom, can we have pancakes? Absolutely, I called back. As I pulled out the mixing bowl, I thought about the woman I'd been before all this. Trusting, naive, trying so hard to make everyone happy. She was gone. In her place was someone stronger, someone who knew her worth, someone who would never again let anyone use her or diminish her or take what was hers. Keith lost his comfortable life and owed me a debt he'd be paying off for years. Nolan lost everything. His freedom, his family, his reputation, his mother's blind devotion. They'd both learned that you can't build a life on lies forever. Eventually the truth comes out, and when it does, the fall is devastating. I won. Not just the legal battles or the financial settlements, but something bigger. I won my life back. I won my power back. I won my self-respect back. And that was the sweetest victory of all. Now I want to hear from you. What would you have done in Victoria's place? Leave your comment like this video, and don't forget to subscribe. And if you want another powerful story, click on the video appearing to your left.